What's going on, guys? It's Cooper Codes. In this video, I'm going to show you how to deploy your Apollo server GraphQL API to Heroku. As you can see, we have a little Heroku app link here, and we can press query your server, and it's going to bring us to a point where we can make queries to the actual Heroku link itself. For this video, I'm going to be deploying an authentication API that I created in a previous video, but the actual functionality of the API shouldn't matter. If you have your Apollo server running locally and everything is working, you can make queries and mutations to it, then you should be able to follow the steps I go through and set up your API the exact same way I do it. You don't have to understand this functionality fully, but I'm going to register a user by putting their username here. I'm going to make testuser3@gmail.com, test password 2. Then I'm going to run a mutation. So this 200 response means that we are getting a response not from our local host, which is maybe something you're used to if you've done my other videos. We're instead getting a response from the actual Heroku link itself hosting our API, which is super interesting. So for this video, I'm going to be using this Apollo server authentication repo that I talked about previously. Again, I'm going to be using this repo, but the steps should be the same. I'm going to get started by cloning this repo I'm talking about here, bring it to my local computer. If you already have an Apollo server set up yourself, don't worry about this step. You already have a server you're going to be working with soon. So we're going to get started by signing into Heroku. So you want to go to id.heroku.com/login. Fill in your information, press login. All right, so this is your Heroku dashboard, kind of where you're going to go to manage everything related to Heroku. We're going to want to get started by pressing create a new app right here. I'm going to name it Apollo-server-auth, and then I'm going to press create app and choose a region closest to you. All right, so now we have an Apollo server auth project created in Heroku, which is a great first step. The next thing we're going to need to do is install the Heroku CLI. CLI stands for Command Line Interface, and it means that in the command line, we can talk to Heroku directly. So go to this link here, which is devcenter.heroku.com/articles/Heroku-CLI. And I'm on Windows, so I'm going to use the 64-bit installer here. You want to make sure that everything has a little check here, and then press next. All right, so I'm going to head on over to my Apollo server code. And so if you want to make sure that Heroku has been installed correctly, you want to go to your command line, just type in Heroku like this. It should show you a list of all the different commands related to Heroku. If you didn't see anything where it says Heroku is undefined, I would recommend a couple things. Restart your terminal. If that doesn't work, restart your computer. I know that seems drastic, but sometimes when things get added to the path, so like for example, when you have the word Heroku and it's recognized as, the Heroku CLI, that means something has been added to your path, for example. And so things can get tricky around that, but eventually you should be at the point where you press in Heroku and it shows you all this great stuff here, which means you are ready to go with using Heroku. So Heroku wants to make sure that you are logged in, kind of like you would log into a website. And so we can say Heroku login to help fix that. So it should bring you to some screen like this. Just press login. All right, so now we're logged in. You also want to make sure that you're logged in as the user you created that project on. Super important step there. And another important step is if you're using your own Apollo server code, you want to make sure that you initialize a Git repository. You can see if you're in a Git repository by saying git status. As you'll see, I'm on branch main is up to date with origin main, for example. If you don't have a Git repository, you can say git init, and it will make your current directory into a Git repository. I'm not going to use git init in this video, but as long as it's a repo that Heroku can work with, you're good to go. And so I'm going to copy this line that they recommend here, Heroku git remote, bring it over to my own terminal. So what this is doing is it's pretty much saying when we use Heroku, we want to push changes to the project Apollo server auth. So this should be the name of whatever your project is. So now we actually want to push changes to our Heroku application. So we can say git push Heroku, and then you want to put in whatever name that your current branch is on. For example, I'm on the branch main. If you don't know the name of your local branch, you can always do git status, and it will show you I'm on branch main, for example, up to date with origin/main. So you guys will see if we go over to our Heroku and we go to the overview, we'll see that we actually just deployed our GraphQL API. So let's open up that current link. You guys might be confused thinking maybe something didn't load. And that's why there isn't this query your server button that you usually see here. Actually, right now, our GraphQL API is running in production mode. So we're not going to be able to send requests to it from the Apollo server sandbox. And so you might think, okay, how do we change our GraphQL API from moving from production to maybe a development environment so we can make queries with it. I'll show you guys. So by default, our Apollo server is going to run on production, but we can pass in config variables to make the Apollo server run differently. So for example, we can do this. Heroku, which means we're talking to Heroku and we are logged in as the user that owns your Heroku deployment. And we can say config set, which means set a config variable, then the name of the variable, node_environment. And I'm going to say equals development. This is going to change our Apollo server to the development environment, and it's going to change how it works just a little bit. And just to make sure, spell development correctly. I actually ran into an issue with that myself, so make sure to do that. And you guys will see, we don't even have to refresh our Apollo server, if that makes sense. It actually refreshes it for us when we change that environment variable. So now we can press query your server here. We can try out another test user, for example. Can run the mutation, and you guys will see we are getting a 200 response from our Apollo server fully deployed on Heroku. A couple things to help iron out any issues people might be having is by default, the Apollo server is going to use npm start. So npm start is going to look at your package JSON, whatever you have in that current folder, and use the start command. For example, I used node index.js. It's going to run this command, so make sure that if you have like npm dev or something, you can change it to that, or npm prod or something. But for me, I just did npm start because that's the default that they use. Also, if you used nodemon for any reason when you are doing development, you don't want to use nodemon during production. I'm pretty sure the Heroku build's going to fail. So go and make sure that you don't have nodemon and that instead you're just running node. One final thing is that when you start your server, you want to make sure that the port is on process.env.port or defaults to 4000. This port right here is from the process environment variables that are going to be defined by Heroku. So you want to make sure that you use this process.env.port. Your server will not receive requests properly if you don't set the port equal to process.env.port. The good thing is that this is literally just one change. You probably were manually setting the port to a number previously or something along those lines. So you just change one part of your code. Whenever you say port for your server listening, make sure it's this variable right here. All right, so now you have a fully deployed Apollo server API running 100% on Heroku, and it's not touching anything locally. Let me know in the comments if you guys are interested in connecting a React frontend that's also fully deployed to this API, or maybe even just using the GitHub integration to make some continuous integration and continuous deployment type stuff. Thanks so much for watching.